The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the seventh and final day of this 7-day session here in January 2024 at Mountain Gate. And recently, someone asked for my comments on right speech. Right speech is one of the Eightfold Noble Path. When the Buddha had his Great Awakening, he first considered whether he would share that experience or not. And at first he was not sure anybody would actually understand it. But in the end, he decided, because he had been practicing with a small group of ascetic brothers in the sense of a brotherhood. And when he decided to sit down and sit zazen and go inward and abandon his ascetic practices, they summarily left him. He wasn't doing the practice anymore. He was a failure, and they weren't going to have anything more to do with him. But then, after the awakening experience, when he encountered them again, one could say by chance or by karma, well, it was definitely by karma, by good karma, they noticed a difference in him. He was not the same. And curious about that, they asked him what had happened. And he decided to go ahead and tell what he had realized. And so in that first, essentially, Teisho of Buddhism, since he was now considered to be the Buddha, the awakened one, and that potential is with every single one of us, by the way. He was not considering himself anything special. And when you go deeply enough in awakening, you realize that you're not anything special. It's just like it is. But it's like it is with a big, major difference. There's no attachment to how it should be in your own mind. There is simply an ease in receiving what comes to you and becoming one with it. In other words, as Mitra-roshi pointed out in explaining his awakening experience, I realized that all I had to do was simply to receive. Simply to receive. No, yes, but just open arms and receiving. And in that lack of attachment to how he might have thought things ought to be, the whole world was open. And responses to whatever it was in each moment were natural and pure and appropriate. And that is the case with the Buddha. And this is what each of us can realize. This is very important to understand at a deep level, that the Buddha is not special, not any more special than all of us are. And we're all special, really. And this is why it's not considered that there's any God or deity in Buddhism, because all of us have that same potential to come to awakening and to become free. So the first thing he said was basically that he realized that the world was full of what was called dukkha in the language of the time, or is often translated as suffering, but it's not necessarily suffering. Sometimes it's just discomfort. It's been likened to trying to deal with a wheel that is running off kilter on its axle. And we had that experience when my older son was born, because the only kind of entertainment we had, we were poor college students at the time, and we still were paying our own way through college and had 2 more years to go. Well, a year and a half to go yet, because Randy was born exactly between semesters my junior year in college, and his dad's junior year in college too. So our entertainment consisted of walking. It was a good thing because it was a very stressful time, and walking was about the best thing we could do to deal with that stress although we didn't realize it. We had no car. We had no money. We had to walk 8 blocks in one direction to the laundromat, 8 blocks in the other direction to the grocery store. That's a lot of walking. And then when we would finish our classes during the day in college, we would walk for hours afterwards, both to de-stress and because that was a release for us. And so we ran through the baby carriage that his parents had bought for us, and we ran through first the stroller that had served well for myself, apparently, my little brother, and my 2 sisters. Tailor taught, it was called, because you could take off the foot platform and the kid could run it around like a little vehicle, and it had a handle. So when the baby was young, but they had to sit up, so they had to be at least 6 months old. You could put them in this stroller from the 1940s and run them around. Since then, strollers have definitely morphed into much more magnificent vehicles. But so we ran through the Taylor Tot. We broke through the axles. We broke through the axles on the baby carriage, and we broke through the axles on a further conveyance for the kid. So I know very well what wheel not running true on its axle feels like. And that is a definition of dukkha. Something's off. And it runs from that all the way to extreme anguish, agony. But it's a range of experience. And all of us who are alive right now can testify, if they've been awake at all during their life. And I don't mean awakened, I mean just conscious. They can they can testify that, yeah, I've had experiences like that, the whole gamut, hopefully not too much on the negative side. I mean the seriously negative side. So that's the first noble truth, that life is characterized by dukkha. And then he shared why it's characterized by dukkha, because we're so attached to things. We want things to be a certain way. We don't want things to be a different way. And so when we have experiences in life, which we all do, there are some of them that are positive and some of them that are negative. And so we want to push the negative ones away. We don't like them. We don't want them around. And we want to hang on to the positive ones. And the same goes for everything. I don't like mushrooms. I hate lima beans or Brussels sprouts. Well, I actually love mushrooms, but anyway, I'm not so fond of lima beans and Brussels sprouts. Well, no, I am fond of Brussels sprouts. That took a long time. We like this person. We don't like that person. We're comfortable in this person's presence. We're not comfortable in that person's presence. We like what this person says to us. We don't like what that person says to us. And so it goes. We're attached to how things seem to be, which, interestingly enough, comes through our perceptions. And our perceptions are driven by who we think we are, our self-image. So he said, okay, after this bad news, there's good news. You can become free. That's the third noble truth. And the fourth noble truth is how to do it, and that is the Eightfold Noble Path. And within the Eightfold Noble Path is right speech. So what is right speech? It's important enough that there are 3 of the 10 cardinal precepts of the Bodhisattva Precepts that deal with it. Shannon, could you get some of those lozenges for me, please? Not the cough drops, the lozenges. Thanks. Thank you. There are a number of different versions of precepts in Buddhism. There are the Vinaya precepts. The Vinaya precepts are the rules for monks and nuns, which were developed, or I should say, put in place during the Buddha's own time. There are literally hundreds of them in response to different incidents that happened that were none too swift during the Buddha's time among the Sangha. When the Buddha was dying, his students asked him what to do about the precepts. And he said, get rid of the ones that aren't very important and only keep the most important ones. But they couldn't agree on what was most important, which means that today some of them are not truly relevant to this modern life, but that's another talk. So those are the Vinaya precepts. Then there are the 5 precepts of the Theravadan lay people. Sometimes there are 7 precepts. Then eventually in Japan, these precepts were boiled down to what are called the Bodhisattva Precepts, the most important precepts, really. And there are 16 Bodhisattva Precepts, which you will take when you do a jukai. And to take a precept means that you'll do your best to live by it. It doesn't mean it's a commandment that you're going to go to hell if you don't. And it's common in Buddhism for people to take the precepts many, many times, because each time you go through that ceremony, your intention to keep those precepts goes deeper. And of course, during that time, you've also been doing more practice, and so you're more able to keep them deeper. And overall, these precepts are considered to be a description of how a deeply enlightened human being would naturally behave without any precepts at all. Just that's their natural behavior. And 3 of them regard speech, because speech is so important. And speech has such potential to damage. And the precepts are about not causing suffering. This is the whole point of the Buddhist path, is not to cause suffering. And it doesn't mean you turn into a Pollyanna where everything is theoretically good. In fact, one of the precepts is not to lie, but to speak the truth. That is a sticky one. It's not as simple as one would expect. And the example I use here is if during the Second World War and you were living in Germany and you were housing refugee Jews. You're not Jewish yourself, but you had taken this family in, which would have been killed otherwise, and they're living in your attic. And the Gestapo come to the door, and they say, "Why are you buying all this extra food? Are you harboring Jews in here?" And to tell the truth is to say, "Well, yes, they're up in the attic. Go check them out." But that would result in these people being killed, and possibly yourself as well, and your family. It has happened. It did happen. In Europe during the war, there were many people who were not Jewish who took in Jewish folks to save their lives. Anne Frank, who's quite famous, was a young girl and lived in the attic of a non-Jewish family. And she was eventually found and killed. So what is right speech then? If you tell the truth, yes, there are Jews in my attic, and the result is that they are killed, which means you're also resulting, you're causing the death of people. You're breaking the first precept, which is not to kill, but to cherish all life. So as you can see, it's not anywhere near as helpful as it seems. And I know people who have asked me, I feel bad because I've had an affair, and my husband doesn't know about it. And she and her husband are getting older, and she's feeling guilty. Should I tell my husband? And my answer is no. that will cause more pain than you will experience knowing what you've done. It has to be really felt clearly and cleanly. And that is why our Zen practice is so important. Because for a long time, a very long time, we are caught in attachment to lots of things, primarily to who we think we are, who we assume we are, which is not at all the truth. But still, we're very invested in protecting that self-image. And until we are able to see through it to at least a little bit and have some degree of awakening, we are going to live life through the lens of that view, which is a false view. We are not who we think we are. So, not to lie, but to speak the truth. And there are two others. Let's share what Wikipedia has to say. I think I need to get my other glasses on. I have glasses for computers. I have glasses for other things, like reading up close. A disciple of the Buddha must not himself or herself use false words and speech, or encourage others to lie or lie by expedient means. They should not involve themselves in the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of lying, saying that they, for example, had seen what they had not seen, or vice versa, or lying implicitly through physical or mental means. As a Buddhist disciple, they ought to maintain right speech and right view always, and lead all others to maintain them as well. If instead they cause wrong speech, wrong view, or evil karma in others, they commit a parajika offense. Well, what they commit is not necessarily so important as the fact that they're creating negative karma for themselves and for other people. They are causing suffering. So it's not just not lying. It's also about innuendos, inferences, implications, all kinds of things we can do that we might not overtly be lying, but the effect is the same. Then, a disciple of the Buddha must not themselves broadcast the misdeeds or infractions of Bodhisattva clerics or Bodhisattva laypersons, or of ordinary monks and nuns, nor encourage others to do so. And really, that encompasses everything, everybody. You don't speak of the misdeeds of others, is how it's written in our precepts, our precept wording, but work on our own misdeeds. It's a hard one. Gossip is rampant, and it feels kind of cool to have some secret news about somebody, particularly negative, that you can share. But it's pretty unfortunate. It harms the person who's speaking it, and it harms the person who's hearing it, and it harms the person who it's about. It's not right speech. And then the third one, it's about not praising ourselves and disparaging others. A disciple of the Buddha shall not praise themselves and speak ill of others or encourage others to do so. They must create the causes and conditions, methods, or must not create the causes and conditions or methods or karma of praising themselves and disparaging others. As a disciple of the Buddha, they should be willing to stand in for all sentient beings and endure humiliation and slander, accepting blame and letting sentient beings have all the glory. That's a hard one for people. I know a Buddhist monk who was accused by someone of sexual advances, inappropriate sexual advances. I happen to know that person, both of them actually, and it was very clear to me that accusation was not accurate. And I learned of how that supposed perpetrator was treated and what they did, which was simply open and listen. Open and listen. So it's a challenging one to keep right speech. And unfortunately, we got plenty of examples right now in politics of the opposite. What's most important is that we don't carry it on. Not to cause pain and suffering. But also, it's okay to stay silent rather than say something that is not appropriate. In the case of the person that was accused that I just spoke of, they definitely had an awakening experience and felt no need to defend, even though they were being accused by a number of people. And finally, interestingly enough, the accuser, a couple of years later, confessed to me that maybe they had dreamed it. I was just watching on the news. There's a something in one of the news feeds about a father, an immigrant father, whose skin is somewhat dark, and his son. A father is married to a woman who's not dark, and the father was in having his son in a playground. It actually was a basketball court in Brooklyn, and a woman suddenly came up to him and probably noted a special scarf around his neck that was given to him when he was on a rights mission to Gaza some years back. It happened to be a Palestinian scarf. And the woman came up irate, saying, "Get out of here, get out of here. You don't belong here. You're a Hamas. You're a terrorist." She said those things. And he who was not Palestinian at all, in fact, he was Punjabi, he was Indian, East Indian, was initially shocked. And then as the woman kept coming closer and being increasingly negative to him, swearing at him and so on, he finally decided to take out his phone and record it. And then she got really mad and said, don't photograph me. And she threw her phone at him. It missed. And then when that didn't hit him, she threw her cup of coffee, which she was holding in the other hand, at him. And on the way past his neck, the lid came off and he got a little bath in hot coffee. And he continued to record her irate voice. And then he went home, talked to his wife. I mean, he was pretty shaken by this. And the kid, who was 18 months old, I'm sure was disturbed as well. And so he shared the video with his mom, with his wife, and he decided to put it on his Instagram channel because he thought, this woman should be taken to task for this. It's abuse. It's racist. It's a hate crime. So he did that, and then it kind of burgeoned. Lots and lots and lots and lots of responses, both positive and negative. And then people started saying, "I know who this woman is," and identifying her by the hat she was wearing, which happened to do with a gym membership. And it got worse and worse and worse. And then somebody decided that they knew the woman based on the hat. There was another woman who was completely innocent and belonged to the same gym and had a similar hat. It wasn't the same hat, but it did have the insignia of the gym. And she was getting more and more negative hate expressions. Plus, her friends were coming online and saying, "No, this is not her. You got the wrong person," because she didn't actually look at all like the person. And the person in the hat and sunglasses, it's kind of hard to tell who that person was. But this other one was nailed as being the person. She began to fear for her life. She got all kinds of hate messages. "We know who you are. I'm 2 blocks away. Look over you better look over your shoulder all the time," and stuff like that. And she began to get quite frightened. She happened to be a lawyer too. I didn't actually get to read the whole article, but it's enough to share because of what seemed like the right thing to do in response was to post the thing on Instagram and in essence let karma take care of itself. But karma got derailed and ended up being focused on a completely innocent woman. And I don't know what the end story was, but he actually had taken the video to the police station a few blocks away from where he was, and they took it and said, "This is a hate crime. We will investigate it." And then they called him up and asked him if he would double check a couple of things for them. And there's a big question about whether he should do that or whether they should do that. And so he finally did go to the gym and asked for the name of the person in the picture. The gym said, no, we cannot give out private information. And then he went to the bakery where she had gotten the coffee, and they said they'd look at their surveillance video and get back to him, which they didn't do. And then he called the detective and said, this is what happened. I did look for this information, and this is what happened. They said, well, don't worry about it. You don't need to do anything more because we've identified her, and we're setting an arrest warrant. But then there's the big question. Since so many people thought they knew who the person was and named her, identified her, gave her street address, her apartment number, her car license plate, and photographs of her up front, he was quite worried, and I don't know what ended up happening, but I suspect that they tried to arrest the wrong person. And the question is whether that person, because of so much accusation on the web, would not be able to defend herself. This is another example of inappropriate speech, really. If he had not posted it on Instagram, but had simply gone to the police station and shared the information, as he didn't know who the woman was, and left it up to them to find her, then the possibility would be more likely that they would find somebody who indeed was identified as the person. They had her voice and so on. But instead, it was left up to sort of a kangaroo court on Instagram. And it sounds like, because the title of the article is "This is Not Justice," it sounds like the wrong person might have been fingered and suffered because of it. They were suffering anyway, because it was weeks gone by where this was going on. And she began to get notice of it. She began to receive all kinds of hate messages, along with her friends saying, this is not who this person is. We know her. This is you got the wrong person. That didn't make a difference. It's an example of wrong speech. Even though it's a video on Instagram, it's still wrong speech. In two ways. Both that the woman was accusing this guy, who was not Palestinian anyway, of being Hamas and a terrorist, and also that he decided to sort of publicize it in a way that was inappropriate. In other words, as I said, sharing the information with the police was appropriate, but then taking matters into his own hands was not. The irony is that he was a rights worker. He'd gone all over the world working for the rights of people who were being abused, singled out for hate. So those are the three precepts about speech. And we can see, I think, how each of them could cause pain and suffering. Lying or misrepresenting, telling stories about people, even if they are true, that were negative, and praising yourself, trying to put yourself on top as better than others. So I think that's it. This has already gone way over. I'm sorry. Thank you for listening, and let's recite the 4 vows.